Hey, Eagle fans, I'm Thomas Mott. Welcome into Philadelphia Eagles Now here on a Tuesday, getting ahead of the game this week. A lot of things going on, and so get your mailbag questions in right now on this video. Down below, #Eagles. You must be a subscriber. It's always a little caveat. All you newbies here on the channel, we're trying to get as many subscribers as possible. Therefore, as many mailbag questions as possible. Get that video later on this week. Go down below right now and use the #Eagles and ask away. All right, so I'm going through the 2022 free agent options because naturally the Super Bowl ends and I'm already looking ahead to Eagles free agency. And I want to give you guys 5 players who would be cheap free agent options. Now, some on my list are like super cheap, like less than $5 million a year. A couple get close to $10 million a year, but I didn't want to go over, right? Because Philadelphia, they have about $20+ million in cap space, can be a little bit more based on, re-signing people like Darius Slay or getting rid of like Andre Dillard. So there are things that can obviously make this more money, but I want to give you guys some cheap options. So these are not, number one starters at their depth chart who are going to provide instant impact. They're rotational guys that would, I think, balance well with the current roster that Philadelphia has. And so, alongside the 3 first-round draft picks, there are cheap free agent options to kind of plug some holes, fill some gaps, and that, of course, is today's video. Your team needs, as we talked about, I'll keep updating this, and as I continue to go along, we'll mention it one more time, linebacker, defensive end, wide receiver, cornerback, and, of course, the offensive line. Now, obviously, we're not going to plug all those holes with 5 players from today's video, but you'll see as we give you some of these names where they fit on our current list of 5 in terms of the team needs. Again, there are a lot of free agent hidden gems. Every single year you get into free agency and there's, this guy was signed for $3 or $4 million and you kind of forget about it. You get to the season and they pop off. They play well. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this list right now is find some of those hidden gems, whether they were injured last year, whether their production was down last year, whether you need them at a position or not. Who would fit well with Philadelphia, give you guys some names and some ideas to help you guys stay up to date with how my brain works, which of course is always focused on improving the Philadelphia Eagles. Ad break, pin comment down below. Who is your top free agent target? They probably won't be on this list because you want, Davante Adams or Mike Williams, which of course I do as well. But who is your top free agent target? Let me know down below right now. I'm going through my first list here with our first player. It's Raheem Mostert. Now, I mentioned Raheem Mostert in a mailbag video weeks ago, and I really liked the idea. Someone presented it to me, what about Mostert? And I said, yeah, honestly, it makes a ton of sense. You got to assume that either Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, or both are going to leave in free agency. I think there's a good chance that at least one of them does. Now, you already have Kenny Gainwell and Miles Sanders, and so mathematically, you don't need a running back, but Mostert is one of those cheap options who, when healthy, can be really, really good. I mean, you go back to kind of the early parts of his career, and he's not that old. He's not necessarily an old player overall. A couple years ago, I mean, he was balling out of his mind in the San Francisco offense. He's a downhill runner. He still has speed and some elusiveness. I love the idea of getting a guy like Raheem Mostert. Now, why would he be so cheap? Well, because he had some knee cartilage that was an injury that happened like week 1, and he basically didn't play at all last season, and so he's a little bit banged up. He's had some injuries in the past, and so I think you could get him for like $1.75 million a year. You could sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal and give him $1.75 million a year, and that would be really cheap, pennies on the dollar, and give you another option to pound the rock, which Philadelphia will undoubtedly do, regardless if it's Jalen Hurts or Russell Wilson in there at quarterback 1. And so first player, again, very cheap, has some injury history. That's why he's cheap, obviously, but he's a name that I really like, and I like the idea of to potentially go ahead and bolster that backfield that will lose some of the internal guys that are there. Who do you guys think will lead the Eagles in rushing in 2022? I think we all hope it's Miles Sanders, but who knows? I mean, seriously, who do you think will lead the Eagles in rushing in 2022? Let me know who you think that is down below right now. All right, next player on our list. Again, we're going cheap here. What about Ndamukong, the defensive tackle from the Tampa Bay Bucks? He's not going to re-sign, right? Now, he's old. I think he's a little dramatic. I think that he can be kind of a dirty player in his past, but he has been productive, as we'll talk about here. And if you look at the Eagles' defensive line depth chart, they don't need a D-tackle because they have Javon Hargrave and obviously Fletcher Cox and Milton Williams. What happens if Cox is cut or traded, right? That's when it gets interesting because you assume that Williams becomes, Cox's replacement, and then you need a rotational guy to fill in behind the gaps of the Hargrave and Milton Williams combo. And so what about a veteran like Ndamukong who can go there and continue to kind of hopefully, train along some of these young pass rushers and provide a hole clogging pass rushing guy in the middle. I think that Sue makes a lot of sense to a lot of football teams that would like some rotational D-line depth. And if we saw the Eagles do in the past with Chris Long and unsuccessfully last year with Ryan Kerrigan, they like to throw in a cheap veteran on a 1-year deal to add some rotational depth to that depth chart. I think you get him for like $5 million a year. Now, it could be less, could be a little bit more, but, a 1-year, $5 million deal for a guy, give you 4, maybe 5 sacks, and just plug a hole and be kind of nasty there on the defensive line. I don't hate the idea, even though he's not the favorite player here on my list. Next player will be a quarterback. We'll get to that in just one second. First, though, these Eagle polos are still on sale, man. Did you get one? I think these are fantastic. The black and green, the vintage logo, these look really, really good. It's still 30% off right now at the link, chatsports.com/Eagles polo. Pick up your 2-pack right now. You got to be in Zoom meetings all the time. I'm in Zoom meetings all the time. Rep the birds, right? Come on, it's the offseason. It's fun. Chatsports.com/Eagles polo. Link down below me and also in the description box. It's 30% off. So order now. That way you get, while the deal is still out there, your 2-pack black and green, the vintage polos. Grab them up right now. All right, next player on our list is a quarterback, and here's what I'm thinking. If you trade away Gardner Minshew, which we'll talk about in a video tomorrow, I think that they will at some point, you do need a backup quarterback. Now, my option would be drafting somebody. But if you wanted to get somebody in the mold of Jalen Hurts or maybe in the mold of Russell Wilson, right, Geno Smith would make a ton of sense. Again, they're probably going to trade Gardner Minshew. Now, if they want to keep Minshew, I'm fine with that. You don't have to trade him. I think he's a great backup. I think Minshew wants to go fly. He wants to go, potentially compete to be a starting quarterback, and obviously he's not going to do it in Philadelphia. So maybe you wanted a veteran backup. The Eagles have always wanted one. And Smith, again, filled in for Russell Wilson as a Seahawk the past couple of years, and really for a couple of games this year, and didn't look absolutely terrible. I think he'd be cheap. He's not the cheapest backup quarterback, right? About $3.5 million a year, but that still is plenty cheap for a position that Howie Roseman deems very, very important. Now, I would draft a quarterback in the middle to late rounds of this year's draft just to, have that next guy, not to be the replacement, but just to have a backup that you can go ahead and mold. You think about what they did with Nate Sudfeld during the Carson Wentz era, where he was a very good backup, and they loved him from what he was able to do. I think that Smith could be an option. There are a couple of cheap backup quarterback options, but Smith, especially if you trade for Russell Wilson, which is the rumor that's swirling around right now, someone that's familiar with Wilson and very much in the style of Wilson as well. You guys think Gardner Minshew will be an Eagle in 2022? I don't think he will. There are a lot of people that say that he will be. I don't think that he will. If you think that he will be, type Y down below for yes. I think that he will not, go ahead and type N down below for no. All right, a little more expensive, still cheap, but more expensive, right? Let's talk about a guy who was an Eagle, who I hated when he was an Eagle, and now he's turned out to be a baller being away from the Eagles. That's Rasul Douglas. Remember Douglas taken like the 3rd or 4th round? Wasn't it West Virginia a couple of years ago? I don't remember, but supposed to be a tall, long, lanky cornerback, and he just never really fit in with Philadelphia. You think back to the Calvin Johnson Thanksgiving Day game. I think that was Rasul Douglas getting burned for 3 touchdowns by Megatron, and I was so done with him, get rid of him. But now as you look at the cornerback depth chart, yes, you have the rookie from last year in McPherson. Maybe he becomes, your cornerback number 2. Maybe you draft somebody. But if you wanted to sign someone who was very, very productive to be opposite of Darius Slay, Douglas is that guy. I mean, with the Green Bay Packers, he was an absolute monster in zone coverage. 5 interceptions this past year and was incredible. One of the most improved cornerbacks that I've seen the past couple of years. Now, he's more expensive. 3-year deal, $6.75 million a year is where I would go ahead and probably pay him. Might be worth a little bit more. But talk about reuniting him back where he was drafted in Philadelphia. And if he plays like he did with Green Bay in Philadelphia, him and Slay would be a 1-2 duo. That'd be absolutely fantastic. You can draft Ahmad Gardner, and I probably prefer that. But if you can't get Gardner, if he goes too early, which is looking like he probably will, take a look at a guy like Douglas as a free agent cornerback. Would make a ton of sense. All right, so we've gone through our 4 players on our list of free agents, cheaper free agents here. Of course, Mostert, Sue, Geno Smith, Rasul Douglas. One more, a little more expensive, but a name that's not been talked about at all in any sort of Philadelphia Eagle talk, and so I want to at least present the idea. That is Will Fuller, who, yes, has been injured and was suspended at the later end of the 2020 season, and so he's had a lot of history that's not necessarily great, but go back to 2 years ago in 2020, and he's very productive. He's kind of this guy that everyone always thought, going back to the Houston Texans, would pop to be a great receiver and never could just stay healthy and on the football field, but when he's out there, only 53 catches, he had 879 yards in 2020 and 8 touchdowns. The guy's a deep threat, the guy's a monster, and if you wanted to go ahead and bring in kind of a wild card receiver, kind of what they tried to do with Deshaun Jackson a couple of years ago, if he hits, fantastic. If not, oh well. I think that Will Fuller could make a lot of sense. Now, I'd rather have Mike Williams. We talked about that. I'd rather, draft somebody, Jameson Williams, or get Chris Olave. Like, those are better options, right? But if you wanted to take a risk here on a high-risk, high-reward receiver who wouldn't cost more than $8 million a year, $7.75 million a year. I don't think he'd be that expensive. A 1 or 2 year deal is kind of a, why not? And again, you're trying to add some talent on the outside there where they draft somebody or sign somebody, who knows. But what if you got Mike Williams and then threw a little money at Will Fuller, right? And then, you got 2 of them to replace, J.J. Whiteside and Jalen Reagor, and then you have Smith and you have Fuller and you have Williams. Like, these are all options I think that make a ton of sense. I don't know if Will Fuller is the perfect fit, and I think that there are other better options. But looking at cheap options, Mike Williams is going to cost $10+ million a year. Like, he's not a cheap wide receiver. He's a top 3 wide receiver in free agency. Like, if you want to get a cheaper receiver, you got to kind of, risk it for the biscuit a little bit here, and hence why I want to throw Will Fuller onto my list of 5 here. And again, they're going to get a wide receiver at some point. Like, they're going to add a wide receiver to the depth chart. The question is, will it be through free agency? Will it be through the draft? Will it be through both? I would not be surprised by the time that we're done with the offseason, the Eagles have added 2 receivers, whether 1 in the draft, 1 in free agency, 2 in the draft, none in free agency, or 2 in free agency, and then none in the draft. All right, our final list of 5. We'll run through this very quickly as we end today's show. Running back, Raheem Mostert. Defensive tackle, Ndamukong. That's probably the most controversial one. I think that it will be. We'll read your comments. We'll see. Geno Smith, backup quarterback. Maybe if Russell Wilson, backup quarterback, because that's been rumored like a billion times. Rasul Douglas, my favorite on this list. I would love Rasul to go ahead and come back. Unless they get Ahmad Gardner. Then I'd rather have Ahmad Gardner, right? Come on. And then Will Fuller, to be a little risky there on the risk for the biscuit. Again, these videos are not like, these are the 5 that they're going to sign. It's like, what about these guys? What do you guys think? Here are my 5. I put through the list. I'll read your comments down below. If you like somebody on the list you definitely want the Eagles to sign, you need to know who it is. I think it'll be Rasul Douglas or Mostert, but you know what I do. I read the comments, so let me know. All time for today on our Eagles free agent video. Plenty more content coming up next couple of days and weeks. Be sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter, @RealThomasMott. Approaching 3,500 followers on Twitter, so if you guys like my content, go to @RealThomasMott on Twitter and hit that follow button. For the Eagles now, Thomas Mott signing off for the rest of your day.